Roughly 40 million barrels of Iranian crude are parked on tankers near Malaysia, east of Singapore. Those vessels hold the equivalent of 20 very large crude carriers, and the oil is already outside the Persian Gulf blockade zone. The Trump administration is now trying to stop Tehran from turning that floating stockpile into money. The blockade itself has cut new exports hard. Kpler data reported by Reuters shows China's imports of Iranian crude fell to about 534,000 barrels per day so far in August, down from roughly 823,000 barrels per day in July. Tehran still has options because barrels that moved before the blockade tightened are not trapped. Iran holds an estimated 80 million barrels in floating storage overall, with roughly half near Malaysia. Most of that oil is already promised to buyers, mainly China's independent refiners. Washington calls the next phase its financial endgame. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on Sunday launched Operation Economic Outcast and promised a zero-leakage approach to cut Iran's remaining revenue. The administration is weighing penalties on ports, refiners, or shippers that take the crude. For everyday drivers, the fight shows up at the pump. The source reported that U.S. gasoline prices, now above $4 a gallon, are testing household budgets. When supply is squeezed, refiners pay more and pass costs along. Here's how that math hits a tank. For a 15-gallon fill-up, a 60-cent per gallon jump adds $9 to your total. That's the kind of swing that follows major supply disruptions, whether from blockades, storms, or refinery outages. Local impact depends on who buys the oil. In Malaysia, where many of these tankers sit offshore, port authorities and ship-to-ship transfer firms face U.S. sanctions risk if they help move or store the cargo. Refiners in nearby Johor that have handled Iranian grades before are now bidding on alternatives like Brazilian or Iraqi crude as availability thins. The broader picture is about time and cash flow. Iran earns roughly $1.5 billion a month from current discharge rates of 650,000 barrels a day. At that pace, the floating stockpile outside the blockade gives Tehran about 4 months of revenue before new sales must break through. The blockade began tightening in mid-July, with the U.S. Navy resuming operations against Iranian ports and cargoes on July 14, 2026. Before that, Iran moved an estimated 57 million barrels out of the Gulf during a brief gap between blockades. What happens next hinges on enforcement. If buyers, insurers, and ports avoid the oil, the stockpile loses value. If not, Iran keeps a revenue bridge while the Strait of Hormuz remains contested. The administration says the goal is zero leakage, meaning no new dollars for Tehran's budget. This is Dr. San Jose, and thank you for listening. Until the next video, thank you and God bless.